Hello, Andy.
How are you?
I am well. It's so good to be with you. For those joining us and listening in, I'm Sayal Her with Andy Simon, and I have the great opportunity to represent Catalyzing the Future in collaboration with the Women Business Collaborative, most definitely Andy yourself, and we have an incredible event coming up in May all around rethinking women's leadership in business.
What a great topic for catalyzing the future as we are beginning to build a new normal. It's a marvelous time. Don't ever waste a crisis. And this has been one that we're ready to go capitalize on to really transform the place of women in both business and society. So, Sai, thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours all around, Andy. And your book, if you will, I want people to hear the story because your book truly, if you will, catalyzed us in coming together and moving us forward. So I thank you for showing it, Andy.
I thank you for thinking about it because, there we go. Rethink was a book that I sent to Sai just before it was published in January. And I said, take a read and see what you think. What can we do with it? A book is a book. And as everyone who's written a book, Sai has his anti-fragility. The question is, how does it help people, and I say these words very intentionally, how does it help them see, feel, and think in new ways? Because that's the only way we can change. And if you don't see it, you don't know what it is. So how do we rethink and smash the myths of women in business? And so out of that came Sai and I talking with Edie Fraser from the Women's Business Collaborative and a whole team to think through, could an event help empower people, women and men, to begin to see what women can be and how they can be the leaders that we need to really transform business and society coming into the future. Sai?
Andy, when I read the book, a lot of things grabbed me, but I'm really, really interested. Sort of what inspired you to take the initiative to put this work together?
Well, origin myths, since we smash myths, origin myths are always important. Where did this come from? And people ask me, what's my next book going to be? Not yet. But this one came out of a program my husband and I launched at Washington University in St. Louis called the Simon Initiative for Entrepreneurship. He's an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur. And we were interested in helping women entrepreneurs in particular. And one of the things that we found during all of our Her Summits was that women were looking for role models. So I began to write a book of women I knew who had really made success come out of nothing. They all heard, oh, women don't do that. No, you can't. You won't be a lady lawyer. Women aren't good entrepreneurs. And somehow they had transformed it and became it. As I was reading to my husband some of the chapters, he said, there's a bigger story here. They're all smashing the myths of women in business. And I said, oh, that's a much better book. And I went back and rewrote the book. And he titled it in a sense, but in fact, he was right. Each of the 11 women in there, including myself, saw what they could do. And instead of listening to, no, there aren't lady lawyers, or no, we don't listen to you in a boardroom, or no, there's no place for a woman in an entrepreneurial venture, they all said, of course it can. And so what became so exciting about it was that they could be inspirational. One of my favorite reviews was a gentleman who gave us 5 stars and said, my 17-year-old daughter now can see what she can be. And she's a minority. And so can I open doors, which means that a book has a life well beyond the book covers. And that became very important for both you and I to begin to think through, what do we do with this? Not just to get more people to read the book, but to do something, to smash those myths. So that's sort of the origin myth behind the book.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Andy, as you reflect on all the chapters and the different myths that you essentially share with us and share the stories, if you will, of the leaders and the women that have clobbered those myths, if you will, anything particularly that you want us to say, hey, this is a particular myth that we've carried for a very long time, and it's one we should pay attention to. But really, your wisdom and guidance, Andy.
There are 2 things, Sai. It's a wonderful question. The first part is we don't pay attention to the way stories and mythology really frame our reality. And what we've learned from the neurosciences and the cognitive sciences is that your mind creates a story, and it's your story. And once you have it in there, you only see the things that conform to it. Which means if you're told that women don't, you begin to think the women can't. And if in fact you haven't seen your mother or your grandmother do, then you don't have any role models Marion Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, had the famous quote that I love: "If you can't see it, you can't be it." So the beginning of the book was really about what's the story that's holding us back. And then the end of the book, I said, okay, how are you going to change your own story? And we put together a process, one that we've used for many years now as an executive coach, as well as with organizations, about how do you change your story? If you are going to break the myth, you're going to need a new one, because humans live their myths. So now the question is, and the reason for the event, is you're going to listen to many powerful women, smart women, men, who have come together to help you reframe that myth, catalyze a new future, and create new stories about what women can do as leaders, how to fill the pipeline so there are more women moving into the C-suite. What happens when you do become, really financially comfortable? Women have a real bad relationship with finance. How are we going to change healthcare so women get the kind of care that they both deserve and they need? And what do we do to become engaged and really build something together? The essence of the Women's Business Collaborative, and why you and I are so excited about it, is collaborative, not competitive. And we've brought together 40 wonderful organizations, probably 42 now, who all have agreed that it's better, we can go further, faster together, as Helen Keller said. Yep. And so we are really on the brink of something extraordinary. And so, Sai, you and I are really enjoying the journey. And I always like to think of this as a journey, and our next step is something that could be exhilarating, catalyzing.
Most definitely. And exactly as you've mentioned, your work with leaders across industries, my work with executives and leaders across industries, male and female. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a very grounding question, if you will. Mm-hmm. As you've put the book together, continue your work, what myths, what single myth, perhaps, I'll say, centralize it to one, do you think that males need to really focus on that they've, I'll say, artificially embraced, Andi? So really interested in your wisdom there.
It's very interesting because men don't live without women. And boys don't grow up without mothers and fathers, sometimes just mothers. And so the creation myth that they each have, and they literally have one, is self-fulfilling in some particular way. This wonderful research, you give boys and girls blocks, and the girls build a kitchen and a nursery and want to have the baby, and the boys build a pirate ship and want to go steal the damsel. And it goes on. Andi Kramer tells the story of the compensation committee in her law firm, and the men all climbed the Empire State Building to save the damsel in distress, and the women all worked together collaboratively to make sure the client never had a problem. Very different myths about what men and women do. The women are often smarter in high school, but think the boys are smarter. A lot of this is in the stories that we see on television, the roles that women are put into, and the way in which we internalize that. Remember, when you hear a story, your own mind and the story there changes. And so coming back, is there a single myth? I do think that the one thing I'm watching with great care is how men are coming to the realization that it isn't a woman's problem. And I do think this has to be transformative because it isn't a woman's problem. Women are who they are. And sometimes they're actually better than what the guys are. But they don't have to be better than. They could be together, collaboratively, a better team. Everyone plays a different role in a different way. And I'm watching the men begin to change the conversation with each other and with women so that the women become included. I think these words of diversity and inclusion and belonging are powerful, but behavior change is very difficult, and the mind hates to change. So the myth that we have to break is that you can't do it, and of course we can.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And Andi, as you look at the event that's forthcoming and the richness of conversations that are going to be had, mm-hmm. And you've mentioned the word movement, if you will, what could be the best possible outcome that you'd like to see happen after the event and from the event, quite honestly?
The event chairs and their committees are all working on the platform to make sure there's a call to act. So, for example, how do we build more women leadership? This is about empowering women in leadership in the workplace or in our society. So as you, as an attendee, come and listen, what are you walking away with to help you identify potential leaders who are women, begin to build better teams or collaborations so women can lead, and they lead differently very often. There was some wonderful research I heard yesterday about how women tend to have they tend to tend and befriend as opposed to compete and fight. And so there's a different approach that they take. If we're going to look at filling the pipeline, there's a woman I know who recruits for banks, and I'm an ex-banker. And most of the banks are owned by men. Actually, they're run by men. They may not be owned by men. And they have this kind of complaint, a myth, that there's nobody in the pipeline for them to move up into senior executive roles. It's a woman's problem. Well, I was an EVP of a bank. It's hard to break through that glass ceiling. Trust me. But now the question is, as you finish leading this meeting, leaving it, and listening, are you going to open up that pipeline, sponsor those women to move them up, get them into good positions, and don't let them fall off the cliff? Because there's that cliff where they just had enough. And so rather than let them have enough, make sure they're in line so they can, in fact, become the kind of leader that you're looking for. And then when we're looking at healthcare, it's time that healthcare along the entire spectrum begins to see how disenfranchised women are, what they pay for, what they don't pay for, the difficulties there. So there's actionable efforts you can take as you finish coming to our event. It's not just to listen and learn, but we believe that you must see it, you must believe it, and you must act on it. And often the acting part is the one that seems so hard. I am a big believer in small wins. So if nothing else, when you leave, write down a small win, because every small win leads to the next step that leads to the next step. And next thing you know, we're moving. And so don't think it's too big to turn. Do it a step at a time every day. And voila, we will be there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Powerful conversations forthcoming, definitively taking action, changing behaviors, impacting the world all around. And Andi, how do people register? How do people get involved all around?
Well, and before I end on that note, I want to make sure we thank Cy, because his Catalyzing the Future, he's going to smile at me, is really the foundation for Catalyzing the Future. And I've been on several of his other events, and so it's really cool. But you can register. You can register on catalyzingthefuture.com. You can register my own website, andysimon.com or simonassociates.net. You'll see the pop-up right there where you can click and register. The Women's Business Collaborative website has a registration available as well. And don't ever be bashful. info@andysimon comes to me. Cy, how can they come to you?
I'm on Gmail. I'm on Catalyzing the Future website. Numerous ways to reach me on LinkedIn, by all means, as you and I are available.
Then there's LinkedIn, yep. The directory of all directories of all time. But don't wait. It's a good time to register. Join us. We're all here to transform and catalyze the future where women can become the best that they can be. And I'm so excited that we can do this together collaboratively. It's much more fun.
Most definitely. You are a tremendous soul and a tremendous partner all around, Andi. And absolutely tremendous. And by all means, all the work that Edie is also contributing and the organization, we look forward to it. And the journey is continuing. So thank you so much for making the time to catch up, Andi.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.